Millionaire CEO's 7-month-old baby cries nonstop on the plane until a shy girl did the unthinkable. Stay with me till the very end, and let me know where you're watching from so I can see how far the truth really spreads. At 37,000 feet, the first-class cabin was anything but quiet. A baby's cries cut through the dimmed lights, like an alarm that refused to stop. For hours, little Emma Cole had screamed until her face burned crimson, her tiny body trembling with exhaustion. Her gasps broke into weak whimpers that left her father frozen. Ethan Cole, the man who commanded entire boardrooms, now sat helpless, rocking his daughter in arms that shook. He had tried bottles, music, carriers, even pacing the aisle, but nothing worked. Passengers shifted in frustration, covering ears, pressing call buttons, their luxury undone by the cries of a child. Ethan bent his head low, whispering to Emma as panic tightened his chest. Far back in economy class, Maya Parker sat rigid, every sound pulling her deeper into memory. Those cries were not just noise to her. They carried the same rhythm she had once heard from her little brother, the nights she had walked the floor until her legs gave out. Her body still remembered how to listen, how to understand what others could not. She gripped the armrest, torn between the instinct to move and the fear that she had no place in a world like first class. Beside her, Margaret Bennett, a retired pediatric nurse with gentle wrinkles and sharp eyes, studied Maya quietly. She noticed the way the young woman's face tensed with each cry, not in annoyance but in recognition. She leaned closer, her voice low, saying, "Some people are born with ears that hear what others dismiss." Maya swallowed hard, her throat tight, her chest aching as if Emma's sobs were calling straight through the curtain between them. She told herself someone else would step in. The crew was trained, and she was invisible here, a girl with second-hand clothes and a crumpled scholarship letter in her bag. But Emma's cries grew weaker, thinner, like a plea fading into silence. Maya's nails dug into her palm as she fought against the urge to rise. Her whole body shook with the battle between safety and compassion, between staying hidden and stepping forward. Maya's chest ached with every faint cry that reached the back of the plane. Emma's face was flushed red, her tiny body jerking with gasps that sounded like she was drowning in air. Maya's instincts screamed at her to move, but her mind fought back with the sharp reminder that she did not belong there. She was just another passenger in economy, a girl with second-hand clothes and a crumpled scholarship letter in her bag. First class was a world built to keep people like her out. Her nails dug into her palms as she tried to sit still. She told herself someone else would step in, that the flight crew knew what to do. But the truth pressed harder with each sound Emma made. This was not ordinary crying. This was the same cry that had once shaken her family's walls at 2 in the morning, the cry that had left her 17-year-old self-pacing floors with her baby brother until her legs nearly gave out. She remembered whispering prayers into the dark, begging him to hold on because there was no one else to help. Margaret Bennett leaned closer, her voice low and steady, almost like she had read every thought inside Maya's head. She said courage was not about walking into safe places. It was about walking into the fire when someone needed you there. The words struck something raw. Maya felt her throat tighten, tears burning her eyes before she could blink them away. Her legs trembled as she stood. Each step down the aisle felt like her body was moving against her own will. The burgundy curtain looked more like a wall than fabric, a barrier stitched from class and silence. She almost turned back. But then Emma's cry ripped through the cabin again, weaker this time, like a plea slipping away. Maya's breath caught. She shoved the curtain aside and stepped through. The flight attendant froze, her eyes cold with authority. Maya barely saw her. All she could see was Ethan Cole, slumped in the wide seat, his shirt damp with sweat, his arms shaking as he held his daughter. His face was pale with exhaustion, his eyes hollow with fear. He looked up at Maya, and for a moment she saw not a millionaire, but a father drowning. Words broke out of her like a sob. She said she knew how to help. Ethan's jaw clenched, pride and pain warring inside him, until finally he gave the smallest nod. It was not permission, it was surrender. For a long moment, Maya felt the weight of every stare around her. The hush of the cabin pressed on her, broken only by Emma's raw, ragged cries. Ethan's face was pale, his eyes hollow from exhaustion, his arms trembling as though they had carried more than just his child all night. Maya knelt beside him, forcing her voice steady, even as her pulse raced. She told him to lift Emma higher, to rest the baby's chest against his own, in the koala position. He obeyed, his hands unsteady, pulling the infant close. The cries pierced the air, but Maya's calm directions began to shift the rhythm of the chaos. She guided Ethan's arm, tilting Emma slightly upright, so her tiny body leaned against him in comfort. Then she placed 2 fingers over his hand and pressed gently between Emma's shoulder blades. She explained in a hushed tone that this touch could help regulate her breathing. When she looked around the cabin, she noticed the harsh white lights glaring down. She quietly asked the attendant to dim them. After a pause, the overhead glow softened into amber, and the tense air seemed to ease with it. Maya reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. With a few taps, she played a soft, instrumental melody she had saved years ago, the same tune she once used to soothe her younger brother through endless nights. The gentle notes drifted out, weaving through the air like a blanket of calm. Emma's sobs faltered, hiccuped, and softened to small whimpers. Ethan stared in disbelief as his daughter began to relax against his chest. He held still, afraid even to breathe, as if the fragile piece might vanish at any moment. Maya leaned close and asked him to hum, to let Emma feel the vibration of his voice. His lips parted, but no sound came, his throat locked by fear. So she began instead, her hum low and steady, like the sound of a heartbeat. The cabin seemed to lean into the sound, passengers listening as the baby's fists loosened and her body grew limp with relief. A ripple of relief spread through the rows, a few soft claps breaking the silence. Ethan's eyes glistened as he looked down at his daughter, then at Maya. He whispered a thank you, barely audible, but filled with sincerity that words alone could not carry. His shoulders sagged as though a great weight had finally slipped from them. Then Ethan tapped his smartwatch. A recording played, and a woman's voice rose, tender and melodic. It was a lullaby his late wife had recorded during her pregnancy, a memory he had guarded since her passing. Emma's eyelids fluttered at the sound, her breath falling into rhythm with the familiar voice. Maya froze. She knew this melody, had used it once with her brother, because its rhythm matched a calm heartbeat. Without thinking, she hummed along, her tone blending seamlessly with the recording. The harmony wrapped Emma like a cocoon. Her cries faded into a sigh, then quiet breathing as she melted into her father's chest. Ethan's eyes widened in astonishment, then softened into awe. He could hardly grasp how this stranger, a young woman from economy class, could hum the very song his wife once sang. But the comfort it brought was undeniable. For the first time that night, relief replaced despair in his chest. Emma's small body rose and fell in calm rhythm, her fingers clutching at her father's shirt. Ethan cradled her tighter, but his gaze lingered on Maya. In that fragile silence, the barriers between wealth and class fell away. What remained was only a desperate father, a quiet child, and the young woman whose presence felt like a miracle. The plane lurched as turbulence rattled the cabin. Overhead bins shook and glasses clinked on trays. Emma startled awake, her cry piercing the fragile calm like glass shattering. Ethan tightened his hold, panic flashing in his eyes. His breath grew uneven, his arms trembling as though every ounce of control was slipping away. The peace they had fought for dissolved in seconds. He tried rocking her, repeating every step Maya had shown him, but nothing soothed her. Emma's face turned scarlet, her tiny body arched back, her cries raw with pain. Ethan's hands shook so hard he nearly lost his grip. His chest heaved with shallow breaths, his jaw tight, his eyes wide with dread. His voice cracked as he whispered. He had done everything right, but it was still not enough. Maya's heart clenched at the sight. She reached over and placed her hand gently on his trembling fingers. Her touch was steady, anchoring him like ground beneath his feet. She spoke quietly, telling him Emma didn't need perfection. She needed his love, unshaken by fear. She needed his presence more than flawless technique. Ethan blinked rapidly, but the tears came anyway. He shook his head, whispering that he was terrified. He admitted that since his wife's death, every night had been haunted by the fear that he would fail his daughter. He confessed that sometimes he avoided sleep, terrified he would wake to find Emma gone the way her mother had been taken. His voice broke as he said he could not survive another loss. The words tumbled out, broken and raw, until his voice gave way to sobs he could not hold back. His chest heaved, his shoulders shook, and he buried his face against Emma's soft hair, ashamed yet unable to stop. The man who had once stood unshaken in boardrooms now wept openly, his grief finally tearing through the armor he had carried for years. His cries blended with Emma's, father and daughter tangled in the same storm. Maya held his hand tighter, leaning closer. Her voice was soft but sure. She reminded him no child expected a perfect parent. Children remembered warmth, the steady rhythm of a heartbeat, the safety of love they could feel even in the dark. She told him Emma didn't need him to be unbreakable. She needed him to be real, to show her love instead of fear. Her words reached him slowly, like drops of water seeping into dry earth. He closed his eyes, fighting for breath, his palm pressing against Emma's small back as Maya guided him to match her rhythm. She whispered for him to breathe with the lullaby still playing on his watch. At first his breaths were ragged, shaky, but then they grew steadier, anchored by the melody. Emma's sobs softened into hiccups, her body relaxing back into his chest. Ethan looked down at his daughter, then back at Maya. Tears streaked his face, but his eyes no longer held only terror. There was something gentler now, fragile but alive, like a flame refusing to die. He whispered that he had not cried since the day he buried his wife, and now he felt both broken and lighter at once. Maya gave a small nod, her own eyes glistening. She told him healing sometimes came not from silence, but from breaking open. She said Emma never needed a father who was flawless, only one willing to let go of fear so love could take its place. Ethan pressed his cheek against Emma's soft hair, releasing a long breath. For the first time in years, he realized he was not carrying his burden alone. Ethan wiped his face with the back of his hand, still holding Emma close. The baby had quieted, her tiny breaths steady against his chest. He turned to Maya, his voice hoarse but full of gratitude. He asked how she had learned to do all of this, how someone so young carried knowledge that had just saved them both. Maya lowered her eyes, her fingers twisting together in her lap. She told him it was not from books or training. It came from nights she wished she had never lived through. When she was 17, her little brother had been born with sensory problems. Her parents worked long shifts, and money was always short. She became the one to walk the floor with him at night, counting his gasps, finding tricks to soothe him, because no one else could. While friends planned for college and carefree weekends, she carried her brother through endless hours of screaming and fear. Her voice wavered as she admitted she had wanted more, had dreamed of studying, of building a life where she was seen for her own worth. But those dreams had been pushed aside. She had learned to fade into the background, invisible, except when her brother needed her. She whispered that sometimes she still felt like a shadow, someone people overlooked until a crisis forced her into view. Ethan listened without interrupting, his eyes fixed on her as if every word mattered. He did not see a shadow. He saw the woman who had just given his daughter peace when he could not. His chest ached with respect. He told her she was remarkable, that strength like hers could not be taught in any school. For a moment, Maya could not breathe. No one had ever looked at her that way, with respect instead of pity, with admiration instead of dismissal. A warmth spread through her, quiet and unfamiliar, as if for the first time in her life she was truly seen. Emma slept deeply. Her cheek pressed against her father's chest, her small hand curled tightly around Maya's finger. Ethan sat watching them, his heart quieter than it had been in months. The cabin hummed with steady silence, but inside him something softer stirred. For the first time since Sarah's passing, he felt the presence of calm, of family. It was a fragile warmth he had thought he would never feel again. Maya gently adjusted the blanket over Emma, tucking it just enough for comfort. Ethan's gaze lingered on her movements, every gesture careful and sure. He thought about how a young woman from economy class had carried his daughter through a storm he could not weather alone. He wondered how many nights she had learned this strength in shadows no one had seen. Gratitude swelled in him, but so did something deeper, a conviction that this moment should not end when the plane landed. When Emma's breathing steadied into the rhythm of deep sleep, Ethan turned to Maya. His voice was low, almost uncertain, yet full of sincerity. He said he needed her not just for this night, but for the nights to come. He asked if she would consider moving into their home, caring for Emma in the evenings, while continuing her studies during the day. He promised she would never have to worry about money again. Her tuition, her living costs, everything she needed to follow her dreams would be fully covered. Maya froze, stunned by the weight of his words. For a moment, she could only stare at him, her mind spinning with disbelief. She had spent her life patching together scraps, never daring to hope someone might open such a door. Her lips parted, whispering that she wasn't sure she was enough for a role like this. Ethan shook his head gently. He told her she had already proven she was more than enough. He glanced down at Emma, who still clung to Maya's finger, and then back into Maya's eyes with quiet conviction. At that moment, it no longer felt like a proposal between strangers. It felt like the beginning of something larger, an invitation to belong. The cabin had settled into a calm hush, the hum of the engine soothing against the quiet. Ethan leaned back in his seat, Emma curled against him, her small breath steady. Maya adjusted the blanket, showing him how to tuck it loosely so Emma could breathe easily. Her movements were gentle but sure, the way someone acted when every motion came from long practice. Ethan followed her guidance carefully, his eyes watching her hands as if each touch held a lesson. For the first time, they worked together without words. When Emma stirred, Maya reached to steady her tiny head, and Ethan instinctively shifted his arms as she directed. Their gestures met like pieces of a puzzle, fitting naturally as though they had done this many times before. A warmth grew between them, unspoken yet undeniable, the fragile beginning of trust that felt almost like family. Ethan's gaze lingered on Maya, softer now, filled not only with gratitude but admiration. He had seen her calm his daughter when he could not, seen her steady his own fear with a simple touch. His chest tightened with something unfamiliar, not businesslike respect, but something gentler. He wondered how a stranger could feel so essential, as though she had always belonged in this picture he thought was broken forever. Maya caught his eyes and quickly looked away, her cheeks warm. She told herself she was only here to help, that his world was far beyond hers. But when Emma shifted again and reached for her, tiny fingers brushing her wrist, Maya's heart answered in a way she could not deny. She felt something stirring for the man beside her too, not just the helpless father, but the caring soul she glimpsed beneath the grief. In the dimmed cabin light, with Emma sleeping peacefully between them, it felt less like a flight of strangers and more like a fragile home forming in the sky. Maya realized her heart was no longer standing at a distance. It was stepping closer, drawn to the warmth of a man who had finally let her in. 6 months later, life had settled into a new rhythm. Maya lived in Ethan's home, balancing her studies with evenings caring for Emma. With Ethan's full support, she had begun her research on children with sensory challenges, finally able to chase her dreams while still nurturing the child who felt like her own. The house, once heavy with silence, now pulsed with laughter and warmth. Ethan had changed too. The man once paralyzed by fear now moved with quiet confidence, reading Emma's signals and meeting her needs with patience instead of panic. Friends remarked on how much lighter he seemed, not because grief had vanished, but because love had claimed its place beside it. He often said Maya had given him the courage to step into fatherhood with his heart, not his fear. One spring afternoon, laughter filled the house. Ethan sat on the rug reading to Emma, his voice warm and steady, while Maya worked at the table, her pen gliding across pages of research. She paused, listening to Emma's giggles, and thought of that night on the plane when those cries had sounded like despair. Now the sound was joy, a melody of family she had never dared dream of. She looked up, and Ethan's eyes met hers with quiet love. He stood, crossed the room, and before she could speak, he leaned down and kissed her gently. The kiss was soft, not rushed, carrying gratitude and a promise unspoken. Maya felt her heart tighten, then open, as if the years of invisibility had finally fallen away. In that instant, she knew this was not just a home. It was where she belonged, where love had found her, where she had finally found herself. The story that began with a baby's desperate cries at 37,000 feet had turned into something unexpected and beautiful. By daring to step forward with her heart, Maya had not only saved a child, she had discovered her own worth, found a family, and opened the door to a future filled with love. If this story touched your heart, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to Emotional Echoes, the place where true accounts and moving fiction come together to heal, uplift, and remind us of life's deepest values. Until next time, take care of yourself and keep your heart open. Don't forget to subscribe Emotional Echoes for more soul-stirring stories. Thanks for listening.